Hey, what's up folks? Welcome to yet another session of my random videos. And in this particular one, I just thought of giving a word of appreciation and some lessons that I've carried from reading the famous four horsemen of the apocalypse. Yeah, that's Dennett, Hitchens, Dawkins, Harris. And like Michael Shermer says, it almost sounds like a law firm. Yeah. So in this particular video, I just thought I should just give out a few words of appreciation and lessons that I've carried from reading these wise men. So I should probably first start by saying that we've seen in recent time that the four horsemen of the apocalypse have gained this negative connotation at a social level and even at an academic level, because a lot of people primarily feel that the four horsemen didn't really engage the debate regarding belief and unbelief in a very substantial way or in a very academic manner, or to put it more bluntly, in a philosophical way. But I feel primarily that there's some lessons that we can still seek from the conversations and the debates and the books that these people published. And I felt in this particular video, I should just address some of these few points. So to start off, I think I should first establish why I feel the four horsemen made a lot of noise as compared to other people who've been professing unbelief in academic circles. So here's why I feel they made so much noise. I wrote an article about this on my blog site, and I have put the article in the description below. So here's why I primarily feel they made so much noise, or they stirred waters more than we would say well-fit, philosophically charged academic minds would have done. So here's the point. I personally feel they engaged the debate regarding belief and unbelief at a very personal level, at a level that mattered to 90% of the people at the time. A lot of people didn't want to hear debates about first causes or necessary beings and stuff like that. What mattered to people most were miracles, Jesus, virgin births, resurrection, and the end of the world. And hearing voices from the beyond. People didn't necessarily care about what arguments philosophers like David Hume or Thomas Aquinas or more philosophically oriented people were making in those circles. People cared more about the validity of the resurrection of Jesus and things that mattered the most at a very biblical level. And this is where people like Hitchens, Dennett, Harris, and Dawkins touched. They went right at the core of the matter. They hit right at that point where it definitely mattered the most. No one was ready, or no one was in a position to start having philosophical conversations. That is not to rubbish philosophy as a whole. I think philosophy has a place in the sciences. I feel it does so much good. But a lot of people at the time never really cared primarily about first causes and first movers and necessary beings. They wanted to know if the Bible is infallible, or if the Bible is a book that comes with a unique type of revelation, or the Quran, either way, whichever. So when the four horsemen kind of like engaged the conversation at that level, they made so much noises because that's what mattered to the common man. It kind of explains why Sam Harris, even in the conversation that he had with Jordan Peterson in Vancouver, I think the first night of the debate, which was moderated by Brett Weinstein, he said, you've like robbed the noun God of its conventional meaning, and you've given it another meaning that doesn't really matter to the common person. And then Jordan, to duck that, just simply said, look, maybe these people have the same intuitions, but they just don't know how to properly explain them. Which I feel is not really the case. The word God at a social level has a particular meaning, and robbing that noun of its conventional meaning is having a whole different conversation. You know what I mean? So the four horsemen, of course, they were so condescending, and they came at a place where they were just really mocking and blasting and debunking with relentlessness and a zeal that just was jaw-dropping. But I primarily feel that was how the debate was supposed to be engaged at the time, because here were a people who had no regard for criticism whatsoever, and they couldn't take it lightly. Everything was on their side. So these people went there tooth and claw to just fight that and change the social structure. And change the social structure, they did. They did. Yeah, so that's just one of the areas that they did it. But I don't want to dwell so much on that. Now that I've addressed that, I want to move on to something else. I think lessons that I've personally learned from reading these people and watching them in conversations. So I'll start with Dawkins, because Dawkins was the first person that just kind of like opened my eyes to engage into this conversation. I first read The God Delusion when school first closed during the first COVID outbreak, and then we went home. So I read The God Delusion. It was heartbreaking. I was at the point where everything was falling down. I became nihilistic, and I felt this huge existential crisis that just buried me under, you know. But after some time, I watched more and more conversations, even after reading that book. And then with time, I started gaining some confidence to pick myself up on my bootstraps, or to just pick myself up after losing so much, and pick myself up, I did. And that book was really revolutionary in this sense. That book was very revolutionary in this sense. For the first time, it made me see science differently. It just built in me this love for science, and it also bluntly showed me just how incompatible mainstream science, or in a direct sense, purely naturalistic science, is so incompatible with the Bible, if you want to take it at a very literal sense. And that was like mind-blowing for me, because I was coming from a place where I felt the Bible properly squares with scientific facts, when it doesn't. So at that point, it was like a really big shock. Yeah, definitely a shock. But there was this crudeness about the way Richard Dawkins just kind of put things out, you know what I mean? It was so hard to take, especially for a first timer. It was just like rough, you know? But as rough as it was, I just went in there, all out. Yeah, read that book, and it was life-changing. The next book I jumped onto was Christopher Hitchens' book. That book was really revolutionary in many ways, and it engaged the debate in a different way, because it had so much like sophistry to it, and this wordplay about it, and it's almost as if written in a poetic sense. And I liked it because as a poet, even reading those words, it felt like they had some sort of like art to them, you know. Hitchens isn't as crude and direct and forthright like Dawkins. Okay, Hitch too has his days, but the way he engaged the writing in that book, it was just in a very poetic way, which appealed to me, reading it as an artist and a poet. Like you could see the poeticness of the writing in the way he even titled chapters of the book, "Why Heaven Hates Ham," and stuff like that. So it was really interesting too. It was definitely interesting, but a book that I truly enjoyed, which with lessons that I still carry down to this day, is Sam Harris's book, The End of Faith. I think that one just hit right. It resonated with me on a deeper level compared to all these other guys. I never read Breaking the Spell by Dan Dennett. Dan Dennett is one of the four horsemen that I haven't fully engaged with on a deeper level. But it's only now that I've been trying to do it because of my new interest in consciousness, in consciousness and how that can be explained. So I'm recently trying to read the book Consciousness Explained by Dan Dennett. I am still halfway through finishing Anaka Harris's book, Conscience, but I haven't. I have this problem of, switching in between books and failing to finish stuff correctly, like the way I should. Yeah. So I was saying, Sam Harris's book kind of resonated with me on a deeper level, because Sam kind of like touched a lot of things. And unique to all the four horsemen, Sam still keeps a place for spirituality and transcendent experience. So that at first sight might sound so funny compared when you think of somebody as brute, an unbeliever as Sam Harris. Like, where is the space for spirituality and the numinous and the transcendent? I mean, where? But it's there. And I love Sam's take on consciousness, on death, on spiritual experience, and on meditation. So what appealed to me more in the book was how he just showed this weird thing about faith that people don't really notice, you know. He also showed how things that people reduce to faith claims in the Bible, are actually truth claims about the natural world that need to square with the evidence. You know what I mean? And 90% of the time, they don't. So he kind of drew that and said, look, these are just not statements that you're supposed to take by faith. These are truth claims about the world. And if they have to make so much sense, they have to square with our experience with the world and how we understand the world and what we're discovering from the world. And in most cases, they just don't. At best, these are just personally held beliefs that don't square with so much evidence when you put them to the table. And Sam Harris just kind of breaks that down nicely. And then he helps you get this noble lesson from the inevitability of our own demise. You know what I mean? Like he tells you, in as much as it's inevitable that all of us are just going to die, there's still something that you can seep through the hands of a universe that is intrinsically value-free, you know? And he helps you see that seeking questions like, what's the purpose of life, are practically bad questions because they build this space where you feel you have to fill in an answer. But what we're faced with, Sam Harris tries to help people draw this to their mind, is we all are faced with an opportunity. It's not a fact about purpose. It's a fact about an opportunity and what it is that you're going to do with that. And this is where the nobleness comes in based on the choice that you make. You know, it's some people, quite all right, do make dumb choices. Unfortunately, people make dumb choices. But when you're faced with that opportunity, there's something great that you can fill in there, you know? And Sam just walks you through that, which is very interesting. And then he talks about consciousness. He talks about other forms of mysticism that aren't so bad compared to Christianity and other forms of religion. But I can't overemphasize on all those points. All I can say is just read the books on your own. I mean, there's a lot to seep through the books and I just can't go through them in a YouTube video. Yeah, so there's so much to take from the Four Horsemen, and I feel Sam Harris's stance on morality. In as much as most people are critical and say he doesn't bridge the gap from facts to values, or bridge the gap there, or answer the ought-is problem. But Sam helps you see that morality shouldn't necessarily start with morality. We can start from a place where we acknowledge the fact that we're conscious creatures living a life that admits of different experiences, and there's like a spectrum or a landscape where things can get pretty bad or really, really bad, or they can get really, really good. And when you just admit the fact that there's a spectrum of experience as conscious creatures, then there are definitely answers that are so good and so bad in this spectrum of experience. If we could only trade on those answers, you know, in as much as many philosophers feel like we can't get an ought from an is, or we can't get values from brute facts. There are certain experiences that are just so pragmatic in nature that they allow us to sip something off of that conversation and just do something about it. And this is how we usually live. People don't do things while taking into consideration Hume's criticism. no, I can't do this because I can't get an order from my knees. That's just not how practical life goes. There's a certain pragmatism to our moral behavior in relation to other sentient beings that justifies this whole thing. But academically, if you want to make your case make sense, of course you have to take into consideration Hume's problem of not getting an ought from my knees and stuff like that. But practically, Sam's moral landscape has got a lot to offer, and you can make a judgment for yourself. And in closing, the God debate is long, complex, substantial, and endless. Especially when you start charting the path of philosophy. It's never going to end. It's up to you how far you want to take it. But personally, I don't have all the energy in the world to spend all my life philosophically invested in complex, fully packed, substantial philosophical arguments for and against the possible existence of a necessary being. There's just so much I want to do with this puny short life. There are people who are in a better position who are having these conversations already. People in the name of Alex O'Connor and other guys out there who are better suited to engage these sophisticated conversations. All I can say and tell you is, if you are interested to listen to those conversations or follow them to the latter and power your library with books surrounding those conversations, it's a noble cause. Do it. It's definitely a noble cause, but not a cause for everybody. We all don't have the time and the energy to engage those debates. You know what I mean? But if you're new to this, the Four Horsemen are the best place to start. They can lay a foundation for you, and they can help you decide where you want to cross that bar, the philosophical bar, and go into some more sophisticated stuff. And I personally feel the debate with where the Bible has to, with biblical dogmatism and literalism, is done. It's so done. It's so done. Personally, I don't have a problem with most philosophical arguments for necessary beings and stuff like that, first causes. I don't have issues. But the reason why most of those arguments never mattered to me when I was engaged in this conversation with a witness background is that's just not where my head was at. My head was in literal biblical text. And that's what mattered the most. And when the ground for that was like scrapped off, everything else just didn't matter. You know what I mean? Yeah, so philosophical conversations have their place, but they're endless. And currently I want to take my life somewhere serious. I want to do something for Zambia. And I want to contribute in this conversation. The immediate needs that Zambia as a country has, and I feel there's something I can bring to the table, poetically, academically, intellectually, everything. Yeah, I want to talk about debt, I want to talk about inflation, I want to talk about current affairs, and that how those trickle down into the everyday life of an average Zambian. That's where my mind is, and that's where my mind will be for a long time. Thank you very much.